Hello, fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice Podcast. My name is Elle, and I return to you today to read some Law of One material and share with you my perceptions on it. So, if we could just start, if I could please ask you, give me a like, some kind of share, comment, subscribe. That always helps. I very much appreciate it. And today's topics, we are going to be speaking about reincarnation, lessons of love, karma, past lives, like sort of past life regression, and ascension or graduation. Like what are we doing here, right? So that is the idea of today's podcast. And in fact, yesterday I was talking with my significant other, and I was asking her, I'm kind of running low on some ideas. What would you like to know about? She's not as into spiritual philosophy as I might be. However, she definitely has the inkling of wanting to know some of these things. And so, even though I'm super annoying and will always elaborate on these things in detail for her, what I asked her to do is just sort of give me a question as to what, I don't know, what's a sort of a newer seeker wanting to know. So I'm wanting to hit some of those angles. So she sort of asked me, am I on the right path? What about past lives? Being a good person and leveling up. Like, you're supposed to learn the lesson. You're supposed to learn your lessons here in order to leave Earth, but like we come back and we reincarnate. Like, what's all that about, right? So that is sort of what I seek to deliver in this podcast, and let us begin. So I have two small quotes. What order I'll put them in, I don't know. Let's go like this. So, keeping in mind that, the reason for this podcast is sort of like, what's the reason that we're here, right? The reason that we're here is to learn lessons of love. So, so what are we doing here, right? Well, basically, we are in the third density, the third dimension, some people call it. And, we are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We counting in that way. So if we're in the third dimension and we're going to the fourth dimension or density, what would that mean? Well, each density has a certain set of lessons. So right now we're in the third density, the density of choice, and we need to understand which density we're going to, which would be the density of love and understanding. And so our density essentially is dealing with lessons of love, which Ra states right here. So this is session 85.16 from the Law of One material, Ra, and they quote say, "We may suggest at all times the constant remembrance of the density from which each adept desires to move. This density learns the lessons of love." End of quote. Right, so very simple. That's basically, we as humans can become very distracted very easily. We come up with many, many reasons as to why we don't need to act in love. But this is it. This density learns the lessons of love. We may suggest at all times the constant remembrance of the density from which each adept desires to move. Right? So we want to be working with our lessons of love. Now, you may ask, well, what is love? Right? What are lessons of love? And it's a little bit of a harder thing to answer, that's for sure. But just from a more personal perspective here, we can talk about karma and things like that, which I'll try to break down into more detail. But I just wanted to give you this quote first because, a lot of people get worried about karma and getting stuck in this sort of density or whatever. I've heard that before. How am I not going to graduate? Well, what they state here is that since we are in these lessons of love, there is a thing about it sort of being conscious or unconscious. There's a lot of people here who are unconsciously loving, and that is, sort of the beginning of the path that they're on. But once you're aware that this is lessons of love and that this is, you should be consciously attempting to love, well then when you're consciously unloving, that's probably when you're going to be creating karma, which they state right here. So in session 12.29, an entity which acts in consciously unloving manner in action with other beings can become karmically involved. So that's the end of that quote there. I would just point out in this quote here, they do mention specifically an entity which acts in consciously unloving manner in action with other beings. So that's maybe just something to note, because I know somewhere else Ross states that basically we shouldn't withhold any of our seeming desires or our withhold our need to express ourselves, I suppose, to any sort of catalyst from another person. They say, except when you think that it won't serve the other person. So the only time that you really should withhold your service is, if you think that it doesn't really serve the other person, if it's going to be not helpful for them, it's going to be, I suppose, somewhat consciously unloving or something that maybe they can't handle particularly. So first of all, when you're in your lessons of love, you need to be somewhat spontaneously reacting to things, and then you respond to them in action, in real life. Except when you think it's not going to serve someone, in which case they suggest that you just carry that action within the mind, right? Because you could still sort of see where it's going to go, where it might lead. You might not be perfect, obviously, in imagining these things, but you imagine what it would be like to do whatever it is, to react in the way that you feel that you spontaneously want to react, and you do it in your mind so that you're not, causing harm on anybody, essentially. Because if you were really doing lessons of love and consciously loving, you wouldn't ever act in an unloving manner towards somebody. So if you feel the need to act in an unloving manner towards somebody, you may want to just double check yourself and try to do that in the mind and see how that plays out in your mind and see sort of where that leads you, right? Is it going to lead to forgiveness, or is it going to lead to more grudges, etc., etc.? Okay, so let's sort of break this down on a little bit more of a from A to B to C type thing, and we'll do it in order. So I suppose I'll just kind of look at the question that she asked me, right? So past lives and whether I'm on the right path or not, past life regression. So what my lady was asking me was sort of the idea that there's this reincarnation. You reincarnate over and over again. What's the point? You come here and then you leave and then you're gonna come back at some time. So yeah, we are infinite souls along the path. There is a couple of different scenarios where you may be progressing along the path from first density to second density to third density to fourth density, etc. And in those steps in those grade schools, if you will, you're incarnating in Earth in your third density. There is a fact that there's some called wanders, or what some people call in the spiritual community star seeds, which would be like, maybe you've already dealt with the third density, you've already passed your lessons of love and moved on to the fourth and fifth and sixth grade. However, you have some balancing to do, and you decide later that you want to reincarnate in the third density again, in which case you come back to that third density and reincarnate with everyone else as if you were just sort of starting again in third, right? We do that for numerous reasons, normally for service, but also to balance our inner beings and some maybe distortion that we have in terms of too much love or compassion versus wisdom, or too much wisdom with compassion, sort of vice versa. It's usually it's usually a balance between those two things that we're trying to reincarnate and balance. But when you incarnate here, once doesn't really matter whether you come from the higher densities as a fancy old starseed, or you are what they call an Earth native, right? Maybe you've just sort of grown up here from the first density onto the third. Well, you know what? Doesn't even matter. You can pretend to feel special as a wanderer if you feel that way, but you're not really any more special than anyone else. As you incarnate here in third density, you are human just like everyone else. You go behind the veil. There are some very tiny things that are different, but for the most part, you're basically the same as everybody else. So I guess there's just, that point that it doesn't really matter whether you're a wanderer or not. It's really not completely relevant. It's slightly relevant, not completely relevant, which brings up this idea of past lives, okay? So everybody's always very concerned about their past lives, and I imagine why is because I just put myself in those shoes. I've definitely thought, I want to know what my past lives were like as well. What did I do? Was I on Earth? Was I somewhere else? Well, it doesn't really matter, because my understanding is that, you're set up in this life to learn all the lessons that you're here to learn. And so really, you just need to basically be conscious of the fact that you're seeking and look in front of you. I mean, that's basically it. The lessons of love are everywhere. They're in front of you at all times. You don't need to go and figure out what happened in a previous life so that you can amend some karma, or I don't know why you would want to listen to your past lives, right? Like you're thinking, oh, I've made mistakes that I need to to fix, well, don't worry, your soul's got that taken care of. You very much are going to be learning whatever lessons it is that you and your higher self and the creator all think are appropriate for you in the appropriate timing. So, with the reincarnation aspect of it and the past life regressions, it is my understanding from reading this raw material and other quo material from LO Research that for the most part, it's not necessary. You can do past life regression, like through sort of a hypnosis thing if you'd like, and you can probably get some answers from your higher self. Even, some of those answers may be helpful to you. I don't want to like generalize too hard, but I do know that, your higher self will even withhold certain aspects of your past lives from you because they know that for you to know this now isn't going to help you in your daily living. Faith, right? Faith that all is well, that the Creator has these lessons in front of you working. It doesn't necessarily require you to go in with a fine with a magnifying glass and look at your past lives and figure out what it is you need to do to make things better. You and your soul have that figured out, and it's not necessary that you go in there as a third density and try to figure out all the infinity of creation for yourself. Because you are behind the veil and you're bound to make mistakes. So, that is your sort of idea with past life regression. My opinion, right? This is just my opinion from what I've read and everything, is that just not completely important. So I keep talking about karma. Let's just talk about karma. I've done other podcasts on karma before, but it's just always good to reiterate these things as it seems important. Everybody feels that karma is somewhat true. I feel, it's sort of like, what do they describe it in the Law of One material? It's as you set something in motion, those things will continue in motion until something puts the brakes to them, stops the motion. What stops the motion, right? The motion is karma. What stops the motion? Forgiveness. Forgiveness stops karma. Forgiveness is the alleviation of karma. Karma is basically unfinished business between you and another entity. Everybody is you as well, right? Everyone's a creator. So to what degree that you are not loving yourself and others because they are all the same, well, you essentially you're at odds with the universe. The universe loves itself. So to what degree you don't love everything, I guess you sort of have a bit of karma and some forgiveness to do. So as you forgive others and seemingly they forgive you, etc., sort of a nice full circle of forgiveness, true forgiveness, karma is alleviated, right? And even then, like, I would just caution you to not be, just to say service to self people control things, service to others people want to accept things. It's tempting to want to control things to the point of, like, I must forgive things. I must forgive because I must control this. I must control my forgiveness, and I don't want to be karmically involved. It's a fancy trick that's sort of being pulled on you there. Control, right? Control. It's always a tough one. You want to be wary anytime you're trying to control things. Like, discipline is okay, and then there's control, and they're very hard to describe the difference between the two. And I won't really try to describe it. I just want you to know that there is a difference between control and discipline, and you can sort of ponder what that means. Because, if I try to control forgiveness, I'm going to be trying to force forgiveness on from myself and from others possibly, just so that I can have free karma, so that I can graduate. Well, that seems pretty self-serving, doesn't it? Right. The better idea, I suppose, is to work with yourself and be patient. I've had karma, right? I've had issues with people, I suppose, and I've tried to forgive, and I thought, yeah, I'm doing pretty good with forgiveness, but no, it took a good year or two of sitting with things. I don't know. I guess humans are petty. We need to sit with things a long time for true forgiveness to really sort of set in. So be patient with yourself. Acceptance, right? Accept that maybe you're not totally ready to forgive. That's okay. That's going to be the first step towards getting closer to forgiveness. Let's leave it at that. So then let's go into what happens when you do, die in this third density and you ascend, as some may call it. The Law of One, if you're ever searching these terms it's going to be under the word harvest. People don't usually like the word harvest. I like the word graduation. I think graduation seemingly fits. We're sort of in a school, right? And as we graduate from this third density, we move on to the fourth grade, right? I kind of like that idea. And then some people are just going to call it ascension, which, I don't know, it sounds too woo-woo spiritual for me for the ascension stuff. And harvest sounds a little too serious. I like graduation, okay? So let's just do a quick talk about, well, what happens when you die, and are you going to be reincarnating in third density, or are you going to be possibly moving on to the fourth density, or maybe even higher, or whatever, right? So first of all, I just want to caution you here with this bit of info that I'm about to drop. I'm not particularly fond of these numbers that I'm going to tell you. It's more just, I don't want you to think of them as physical, as a marker of success. I just want you to see it as a metaphysical guide, okay? So they say to graduate from this density, one, if you're at least on the service to others path, one must be 51% in service to others in, I'm not sure how they say it, but in thought, deed, intention, and action. Basically 51% intentions to serve others. But even that's hard. I remember first hearing that and thinking, oh, I'm going to not make the grade. But you have to be aware that everything that you do in your life, you do it sometimes for other people, right? You could be going to work, working all day alone, and that might seem like, is this serving myself? But no, you do it for your family, or you're doing it so you can, treat yourself well to the degree that you love yourself, and then you can also treat others well too. Like, there is no difference between service to self and service to others if you're on the service to others path in a sort of way. Those, you just have to recognize that they're both sort of the same thing. So to love yourself, to love others is sort of the same idea. You just don't want to do one at the exclusion of the other, I suppose, is the thought there. So then if you were, though, on the service to self exclusion path, right, you're only just looking to love yourself and love the path of self, and to teach other people the path of separation, and you feel that helps them, because that's sort of what the service to self path is that it is a lessons of love. It's just extreme lessons of self-love at the exclusion of other selves. So they say for the service to self path to graduate, one must be, if I'm recalling correctly, it's like 99% in service to self in intention, action, and deed. So 51% on the service to others path versus 99% on the service to self path. They have mentioned that both of those numbers are equally as hard to achieve. It's equally as hard to be 99% selfish, essentially, as it is equally as hard to be 51% service to others. So I use those numbers, right? Those are the numbers I'm cautioning you about, because I have an analytical mind, and then I always thought, like, I'm going to measure every intention and deed in my life, and I'm going to see, does it half or is it more than half? Don't do that. That's kind of silly. I've done that. So better is to maybe just inspect your intentions. That's probably the better thing. I do some things which seemingly are for myself, but in the wider aspect, I am doing them to serve a wider audience. If I do something good for myself, it's so that I hopefully am a good example of how to love yourself, and at the same time I also am able to go out there and attempt to serve others, be charitable, whatever it is I feel is necessary from my being. But I am inspecting my intentions to the degree that I'm wondering why I do what I do at any moment. That really is what's important. And once again, I've said many times before, the ideal, right? Perfection is an ideal that we strive towards, but you should never necessarily hold yourself up against the marker of perfection. We are always a work in progress. Okay, so say you die, right? How does this reincarnation thing work? Well, I'll just explain how I think even Ra actually stated it like this before too, but I'm just going to give it to you from my head. So they talk about walking the steps of light. So let's say your third density body dies. You have seven bodies. So once your your third density body dies, your indigo body comes, essentially picks up your consciousness, which is you and your higher self, and you get to go through and review your incarnation and everything you did and every choice that you made and how it affected you and how it affected every other being that is in relation to you and even possibly not in relation to you. So you get to see how your actions and deeds and thoughts affected everyone. Great, amazing. It's probably a lot of info to take in. What happens at that point is, well, after you've done your balancing about my incarnation and do I feel good about this and that and accepting things, I suppose. And now we move on and we're going to walk the steps of light. So how it was described to me is this. So let's just say you're basically walking up these stairs towards the sun, towards the light, okay? You walk and you walk and you walk and you keep taking steps until the light becomes too bright. It's too bright to bear. And at that point, you take one step back, right? It's because you don't want to be stuck in some intense place where you get like paralyzed by not being able to integrate the experience. So you take one step back, wherever step you are right there, that's where you're going to incarnate. If you're in the third density still, you're going to reincarnate in third density again and sort of have another third density experience to experience the lessons of love. It's fine. Ain't no hate there, just patience and time to learn the lessons you need to learn. If you find that you're in fourth density on that step that you look at, well then great. You're going to incarnate into the next density of love and understanding, and then you're going to work with all those lessons. So the idea is that if you're 51% in that service to others, then you'll be able to take on enough light that you'll be able to integrate the experience and be ready for the next density. It's not to punish you, right? If you don't make it to the next density, it's just that you just weren't ready to take on that level of light. Like, I would look at this even while I'm saying it, I keep thinking of service to others in the way of literally serving others, but I still always have to remind myself of myself. Like, myself is part of this equation. I have to love myself as the creator. If I'm not capable of loving myself as a beautiful, infinite, worthy portion of the creator, I'm not going to be able to treat others that way as well. So there's no real separation between how I see others and how I see me. If I see anybody sort of differently, other than like this infinite worth of the creator within each being, I'm probably seeing with eyes of separation. And when I walk those steps of light, it's going to become too bright, too fast, right? Versus if I sort of have worked with that love and that light, and I've been integrating my experiences, then it's like I am sort of desensitized to the intensity of the light. How do they describe it, right? Like, if you're walking towards the light, the closer you get to the light, the deeper your shadow is, right? The more your shadow becomes apparent, the closer you get to the light, the harder it is to ignore your shadow. Well, what do? Well, you become more transparent to the light. You let the light flow through you. You're not blocking that light. You're not resisting it. You're harmonizing with what is, and with that the light flows through you, right? Instead of causing a block and a big shadow behind you, you let the light flow through you and you become somewhat part of the harmony, and therefore thy will be done through you. Amazing. So what else shall we say? I honestly think that is pretty good. So yeah, just a little bit of brief talk about incarnation, about karma, about, loving yourself and loving others, why this is important. I think that you shouldn't concern yourself with these things and these numbers too much. I think all you really should do is just work with yourself. Be aware that you seek the truth. You seek the creator. The creator is mystery. The creator is infinite. The creator is love. You're seeking these things. And with that, you don't know for sure, right? Like, even what I'm telling you right now, this could all be just made up. Who the heck knows? Maybe this was all just some crazy people who wrote down a book and made it all up. I don't know, right? Like, this is the idea. It's like, the part of this density is you must understand that you do not understand. the more you try to understand, I mean, how about this? The more that you try to pretend that you do understand or that you do know, you're somewhat tricking yourself and, letting go of everything. And just attempting to love, it's freeing. It's, the mind always likes to think of things and control and wanna do this and that and make sure everything fits in its place. Well, yeah, that's part of the brain, and part of our third density is that it will rattle your brain to the point where its attempts to control things will fail miserably, and you'll be left with nothing except the ability to love. You'll be on your knees and it'll be like, well, I just want to love. I'm a being of love. I can't control things anymore. I just want to do whatever it is that feels right, and what feels right is giving and sharing love. So thank you guys so much for listening. If this podcast made sense to you, I'd really appreciate your support. You can support me at theoneinfinitecreator.com. Just scroll down to the support section. I got Patreon, a little PayPal link if you'd like. Thank you very much. It means a lot to me that you guys support me as I attempt to freely give this service and not put it behind a paywall. It always means a lot to me whenever I see some love flowing through, knowing that, that this, I don't know, that this made sense to you or whatever, that this was valuable to you, I suppose is the idea. So thank you guys for listening. And same thing, you can get links to all this information at theoneinfinitecreator.com. And yeah, I'm going to be quite busy next week, so I'm going to still try to keep on with the 2 podcasts a week, but just wanted to give you a brief warning that if I maybe miss one, don't worry about me, all is well. I'm just visiting some family. So thanks, guys. I hope you have a good weekend. I love you guys. Take care.